All right, section 3, looking at line plots and stem and leaf diagrams. So first of all, line plots shows how many times each data value occurs. So for example, let's say we're talking about the people in our class. So you go around, okay, I have somebody who's 12, somebody else who's 12, someone else who's 12, maybe one 11-year-old. A couple people already had their birthday this year, so a couple 13s. And just so it doesn't screw up the line plot too much, we'll say your 24-year-old teacher. So throw a 24 there on the end. Okay, so now for our line plot, we want to have some way to real quickly look at something and say, oh, most of the people are this age, and so on. So our numbers start at 11 and go up to 24. So I'm going to start down here at 11, and then put a 12, and a 13. So we're looking for even spaces, 14, 15, 16. You don't have to put a number by everyone, but you do need to have even. So 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So if you had started and all of your numbers had ended up being just kind of like down in like this area, then probably best to erase and go back and redo it. Or if we'd gotten down to the end over here and we're only up to 21, well, you need to keep it going up to 24. So you'd either have to extend the line or go back and redo your spacing. So okay, so now to do it, we're just going to put an X on there for every time we have a value. So when I have these three 12s, up above the 12, we're going to do 3 X's. And you want each of the X's to be about the same size as each other. Now, you don't have to do different colors. I'm just doing that to help us see what's going on. So if we have one 11, we need to make sure that my X above the 11 is at that exact same height as just one X above the 12. Let me get rid of those green dashed lines there. So now I have two 13s, so maybe I'll do those in red. But typically it's all just going to be in one color. You'll notice that these two in red are the same height as just 2 of the blues would be. And then last but not least, we have our 24 out here on the end. So 1X there. So by real quickly looking at this data, you can see, oh look, pretty much everybody's down around this 11, 12. Most people are 12. Most people are by the 11, 12, 13. Most people are 12. And then there's this one that's kind of way far off. And we have a name for that one that's way far off. That's going to be our outlier. So outliers, those are data values that are far apart. So that are far apart from the other values, or from the other data, you could say. So when we look at that age one, the outlier, so you could say example 24 above is an outlier. All right, so that is going to be the line plots. And by the way, one final comment on line plots. You'll notice how I put a tick mark here for each of the numbers. Make sure you have a tick mark, and 20 really should be over a little bit. We want to have a tick mark, not just numbers written below the thing. All right, stem and leaf diagram. So I'm looking at this here. Now, the stem and leaf diagram, there's 6 numbers that are represented there. And so if we look, we actually have like 9 numbers in there, but they represent only 6 numbers. Now I'm going to go and write these in different colors too, just to kind of make a point. But over here on the right side, we have just the last digit of our numbers. So when we have the 7, that's actually the second digit in the number 47. So one number is going to be 47. Then I can reuse that 4, and I have the 9, so that gives me 49. Now I'm hoping that if you look at this next row then, and say, well, which number is represented in this row? Well, if this is our last digit, like the 7 and the 9 were our last digits, then this is going to have a last digit of 0 and a first digit of 50. So my second row then has the number 50 in it. And then this third row is going to be all the numbers in the 60s. So I have 62 and 65. And last but not least, I have 66. So that's going to be a stem and leaf diagram. So we probably should go through and label some parts up. So they call this first part the stem. And that's going to have all the digits of our numbers except for the last digit. Over here on this side, we have the leaves. And you'll notice there are no commas here in between the numbers. We don't put, because it's only the last digit, we don't need to put a comma to separate the numbers. And for those, you'll also notice that when we have the leaves, we always have the smallest number being closest to the stem, then the next smallest going all the way up to the biggest. So smallest in the 40s, then the next one there. Okay, so now we want to go through and try to make one for these 4 numbers here. So I'm going to first start by doing my grid. So I have the stem there on the left, I have my leaves on the right. And we need to first, well, I like to first figure out what numbers go here. Well, we have 18, so we have a 1, and the 1 for 14 would be in the same place. We have the 2, but this is kind of a weird one. We have the 6. So it's kind of like, what number is right there in front of the 6? Because we need to have something to put over here on our stem. Well, do you agree I could write that as a 0, 6 and not change the value any? It's still just 6. So when we fill in our stem, we need to have a 0, a 1, and a 2. And then when we're talking about the 0 row, so filling in numbers for there, the only one that goes there is 6, so I have 0, 6. My second row then has to include my 18 and my 14. We put the 4 closest to the line because that's the smallest, then just a little space, then we have our 8. And then our last one is our 27, so we put the 7 there, so it's kind of in that 20s row. And this is kind of similar because just like we had for this line plot at the top, you can real quickly look at the data and say, oh, most of the numbers are here in the 10s. So in the teens if you want to, so 14 and 18. Kind of like here, most of them are 12s, but 13's close, and so on. So it's kind of another way to look at data and get a quick representation of what's in the data. That is it for the section. Let me know in class if I can help.